Recording in progress.
We'll give everybody a few more minutes to connect and just remind everyone as you're joining to make sure you're muted. We'll give it another minute and then we'll get started. Good afternoon, everybody. I think we'll go ahead and get started. And again, I'm going to remind folks as you come on, please make sure that your microphone is muted. This afternoon, we are going to talk about doing data entry for the state plan for AT. And this has been kind of a long circuitous route getting to the online data submission for the state plan. We've not had this since back when the program was at RSA and there was that online system in use. So we're pleased that we're finally back to an online system and we're going to walk through it today, and it will be open for data entry. So hopefully it gives everybody a foundation to begin this process. Rob's going to start off with some overview, introductory remarks, kind of laying the groundwork for the state plan and providing other updates from ACL.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. This is Rob Grindal with ACL. Just have a little bit to talk about here. The federal update as it relates to the state plan, fiscal reminders. You can see on the screen that the due date for the state plan is July 1st. So the FY 2018 to 2020 state plan for AT that was updated and submitted in the summer of 2020 by all of the AT programs continues to serve as the state plan on record for the approved state level and state leadership activities under Section 4 of the AT Act for FY 2020, FY 2021, and the FY 2022 Formula Grant Awards issued by ACL. It's important to remember that, as we're, looking toward the submission of the state plan digitally in the new online system. So the updated 3-year state plan was approved by the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, in 2021. You're all aware that Katata has developed and implemented a state plan information collection component in NATADS for the submission of the AT state plans. The new 3-year plan, was approved with no changes to the format and content of the state plan as submitted, as we all know, in the summer 2020. The due date for the digital submission, of course, is going to be July 1st, 2022, with OMB approval of the state plan through June 30th of 2024. I guess you could probably move the slide forward. I might delve into some other things before we get things really rolling. Here's the state plan overview. I did actually, before, addressing briefly the overview, one thing that's, clearly important, now is the issuance of the FY 2022 awards under Section 4. ACL is in the process of reviewing and issuing the 2022 Formula AT Grant Awards for the remainder of the fiscal year under the Consolidated Appropriations Act 2022 that provided a $1 million increase for the Assistive Technology Act. So thank you all for your dedication, your hard work, your partnership building. This is the significant reason for the increase to the AT Act appropriation for FY 2022. I do want to talk a little bit about the obligation deadline for the FY 2020 AT awards. That deadline is September 30th, 2022. Recall that this past summer, ACL processed and issued new notices of awards with 1-year extensions. Some call them no-cost extensions, NCEs, for the Section 4 formula FY 2020 AT Act awards with balances remaining. So for those 2020 state and territory AT grant awards, that means the obligation deadline is September 30th, 2022. The liquidation deadline is December 31st, 2022. All right, it's hard for me to say that, 2022, okay. So please confirm with your financial offices and make appropriate adjustments so that all of the remaining funds in that 2020 account are obligated and liquidated by those September and December deadlines. Similar to the extensions provided for the FY 2019 and FY 2020 Formula Grant Awards, due to the circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are working, have been working with, currently are working on guidance to extend the FY 2021 AT grants as well. I know that this is very important because as it stands now, the FY 2020 awards have that obligation and liquidation deadline that we were talking about, September and December of this year. And currently it's the same for 2021, but we are looking forward to providing the guidance to also extend those 2021 awards for those who need that extension. So as always, please don't hesitate to reach out to me about remaining balances for any of your grants, or if you need me to mail a notice of award. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks in April, there will be that issuance of the FY 2022 award to fund the programs for the remainder of the fiscal year as appropriated by Congress in the Appropriations Act of 2022. And so for this slide here, this is, certainly something when you look at the state plan overview, obviously, in the statute, the state plan is an application for funding noted in Section 4. All state and territory AT programs are required to submit state plans in order to make this possible. We've been doing this for years. All Section 4 AT programs provide this information uniformly using the state plan information collection instrument. approved by the Office of Management and Budget. And we provided some background as to how we got here, where ACL was going to stand up a system called ACL reporting. We determined last year that this is probably going to be the better route for ensuring the submission of these state plans for all of the AT programs. And so this slide does talk about some of the some of the requirements in terms of what goes into the state plan. As noted previously, this is something that has no changes from the time that was submitted previously. So that's great news for all of us. For the NATAD state plan component, I think we can go to the next slide perhaps. Maybe at some point, Vance or Diane might want to take the baton from me, but I'll just say that, the state plan instrument has been added to the NATAD's dashboard with the AT APR and the day-to-day component in the NATAD system, emphasizing there's no change to the content from the state plan that was submitted by all the AT programs in the summer of 2020. Clearly it's a different way of submission in terms of having that ability to submit it digitally in the online NATAD system. OMB approval, we mentioned that goes through June 30th, 2024. And this will be the initial submission for the 2021 through 2023 state plan for the Section 4 state and territory ATAC programs. Selected modules of the state plan will be updated in 2023 and 2024. So I'll hand it over for the next slide, I believe, to Diane.
Rob, we did
Yes,
have a question come in over chat.
Okay.
Angela asked, so will there be one more installment for 2022 or two more?
This is Diane, and I'm going to assume, Angela, you're talking about the state plan, not the funding stuff that Rob was talking about. And yeah, in terms of the state plan, the initial submission is coming in now, and then you'll need to do an update in 23 and 24, and then another new 3-year state plan will be due after that. And as I walk through these slides, I'll talk through what the update years, the year 2 and 3 of the 3-year cycle will look like. So if you want to go to the next slide, there you go. So I'm going to walk through information on slides just so that folks have information on slides, because sometimes that's helpful if you're trying to provide information to other people about doing data entry. And then Vance and I are going to do a walkthrough of live slides so that you actually see what it looks like in the system on the online screens. So the state plan is set up very similar to the APR. The first section is that general information, which is exactly like the APR. And in fact, it will be pre-populated from the APR. So all you're going to do is pull it up and make changes, whatever changes need to be made in terms of contact information or whatever. And then the rest of the modules are lettered. And module A is the section about implementing entity, and if there's been a change in implementing entity. If you don't have an implementing entity, then obviously it's irrelevant. But that section is specific to any descriptions you need to provide about implementing entity, collaboration status, and change in lead or implementing entity. So for most folks, that section's, if you don't have an implementing entity and you have not had any changes in lead, then you're going to have nothing to populate in that section, quite frankly. This is a section, module A is one that you will need to complete in the 3-year plan and annually, because obviously if there is a change in lead or implementing entity designation, that information needs to be provided, on an annual basis. So module A is 3-year plan and the off-year updates. Next slide. Module B is about the advisory council. And the structure of this section is how many representatives of whatever are on your advisory council as members. And just as a reminder, there are 4 required agency representatives: Voc Rehab, Centers for Independent Living, Workforce Investment Board, and State Education Agency. If your state territory has a separate blind VR entity, separate from general VR, then there's a 5th required agency representative. So when we go through these screens, the question that comes up is how many. So you can say 0 or 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can't even remember, Vance, what it goes up to, but we ended up to, like, I think 2 digits because of some of the other fields down below. If you enter a 0 for vocational rehabilitation, then the system's going to prompt you to explain why you don't have a rep, since they're required. And it may be as simple an explanation as we just lost the person that was there, VR hasn't appointed somebody else, you know, whatever. But that's the way it's structured for those required agency representatives. Then the table or that screen also will ask you how many consumer representatives you have as members, and it will automatically calculate to see if you have a consumer majority, over 50% consumers. If you then it's going to prompt you and require you to provide an explanation for how you're remedying that situation, which again could be as simple as, we've got these applications, people just aren't appointed yet, depending on how your appointments process works, etc. So hopefully in the online system, the state plans that folks submitted in Word documents, there was a lot of confusion about the required agency representatives and the consumer majority. So hopefully the structure online will make it pretty clear what's required and when you need to provide an explanation, because technically you're not meeting the statutory requirements with the membership of your advisory council. This module is one that will also be in the initial 3-year plan and will be updated annually. Next slide. Module C is all of the expenditure data information. There's 2 tables, and these are set up in the online screens with the fiscal year that needs to be reported specifically identified. So for this state plan, you are reporting the liquidated expenditures from the FY19 award. So it's explicitly said that's the award, and in fact, the line D, the total award, is pre-populated with your FY19 award amount. So there shouldn't be any confusion about which grant award period needs to be reported here. So all you will be entering data into is line A, B, and F. Line A is the total expenditures for state level activities. B is total expenditures for state leadership. And line F is the transition training and technical assistance set aside, that 5% set aside amount. So everything else will be calculated so that those aren't cells that you need to enter data into. So hopefully that's pretty clear and a lot more straightforward than the table in the Word document that didn't calculate anything on its own and was very confusing for a lot of folks. And you'll also notice that the transition training and technical assistance set aside line has been moved down to the very bottom, because that is separate from, it's a subset of state leadership. All of your grant needs to be reported as state level or state leadership if you don't lapse any money. If you expend everything, then the total will be in those 2 lines. That additional 5% set aside is part of state leadership. And people were very confused about that also in the tables in the Word document, because again, it didn't calculate on its own, and it didn't give you any error messages. So hopefully this structure will be much less confusing for folks to complete. Next slide is the second table in Module C. And this is about your FY20 award. Some of you may have totally expended this by the time you submit your state plan. Others of you may still have funds that have not been obligated, not been liquidated, etc. So this table is, you know, I don't say it's not as important, but it's more informational for you in terms of where you are with liquidating these dollars than it is reporting, you know, state level, state leadership, making sure you're meeting the 60%, 70%, wherever you are on your requirements for state level, state leadership. Again, this will have your identified FY20 award amount on the screen. So you don't have to go look it up. It will be there. It's actually listed at the top of the table, and then it will be populated. If the total doesn't equal that, you will get an error message saying you've not accounted for the entire amount. So again, hopefully that kind of helps make sure people are reporting the right fiscal year award and it's the, you know, total amount. This module is also one that will be updated annually in the original 3-year state plan and updated in the 2 subsequent years. Next slide. Module D is the module that will generate all the subsequent modules about the activities you're conducting. This is a place where you say, I'm doing all of these state level activities, or I'm claiming flexibility for this state level activity, or I'm claiming comparability, whatever. So this module D, whatever you check off in this module that you do, then it's going to populate a corresponding module later where you'll provide more in-depth information about that activity you're conducting. So if you are not conducting a state financing activity at all, you claim comparability or flexibility, then that state financing module is not going to be populated for you to put in information. And when we get to the walkthrough, I'll show you kind of what that looks like. So changes in this module impact all of the subsequent modules. So it's really important that this gets accurate, and when you first open the state plan in NatHEDS, what you're going to see is module D and not module E, F, G through all the state level, because they haven't been created yet, because you haven't checked them off in this module saying you're doing them. So just so you know, when you first go in, you won't see everything because you've got to complete this module telling the system which activities you're conducting. So when you go in, you will identify the activities you're conducting. If you are not conducting an activity, one of the 4 state level activities, it will ask you then, are you claiming comparability or flexibility? Because you either do the state level activity or you're claiming comparability or flexibility. So based on those responses, the subsequent sections are generated. This is the last module that will be updated annually. And my guess is for most people, this is not going to change very often. You know, it's not all that common for people to stop doing an activity. Little more common for people to start doing something than to end an activity. But it's, you know, most folks are doing most activities, quite frankly, already. So anything you would add or you know, change would literally just be a change in description, not that you're actually stopping an entire state level activity or starting an entire state level activity. It does happen every once in a while, but it's rather infrequent. So for most people, even though this is an annual update screen, you probably won't have a lot to change. It will be, yeah, I'm still doing all those same activities. Next slide. So the rest of the slides are all, and the rest of the modules are all activity specific. So modules E through K have to do with the state level activities. And the questions are a consistent set of questions about who conducts the activity, the state AT program, contractors or both, how is it implemented, centrally, regional sites or a combination, and is there a fee charged? Those are common questions across state financing, reuse, device loan, device demonstration. So if you want to go to the next slide. All of the activities, so state level and state leadership, has another common set of questions, which has to do with partners with whom you are, engaging in a collaboration to implement the activity. And there's a list of partners, and it is literally a pick list with, you can select any or all. And there's obviously an other, and if you check other, then it asks you for a description of who the other is. Next slide. This is the only module that I pulled out specifically to talk about in terms of structure. Other state financing activities, there are 2 modules. So state financing has 3 parts: cash loan, set that aside. Then there's other state financing that directly provides AT, and there's state financing that creates a savings. Examples of the ones that directly provide AT, some of the most common are like the deaf-blind equipment distribution programs, where folks are buying that equipment directly and providing it to consumers. Examples of the create savings, the most common ones are cooperative buying programs or AT fabrication programs. Those are the 2 most common reported there. If you are conducting those activities, and you check off, yes, I'm doing other state financing that directly provides AT, or other state financing that creates savings, or both, that module G and module H are collective. So if you happen to be one of the programs who does, I'm going to use the other state financing that directly provides AT as an example, you do both the deaf-blind equipment distribution program, and you do a program where you directly provided tablets for social isolation this year, or you also do a home mod program where you purchase and install environmental, adaptation, smart home stuff. If you have multiple activities in either of these modules, the big category of other state financing that directly provides or other state financing that creates savings, you are going to answer those collective questions for those activities in total. So as an example, when it asks, do you charge a fee? The answers are yes, no, or both, quite frankly, because it could be that in one program you charge a fee and in the other program you don't. Same thing with all of those questions. You are answering them reflective of all the programs you're reporting as other state financing that directly provides AT or creates savings. There's not a lot of you to whom this applies. There's just a few of you who do multiple other state financing activities. But I wanted to walk through this because some of the folks that did beta testing are people who have multiple other state financing activities. And this is one of the quirks of having multiple activities in these 2 categories. It's kind of like the APR has some quirks with those 2 also. It's just these are very challenging because everybody's thing is so unique what they do, and it may come and go. It may be a 1-year deal and then it's gone the next year kind of thing, because you get money one year and then you don't get it the next year to buy AT for people. So if you do other state financing activities, you have any questions, just let me know and we can walk through it and figure it out. But this is the one place where it's not terribly intuitive, I have to say. So I just wanted to make sure people were aware. Okay, next slide. So just a couple of comments about the module features before we actually open some up and look at them. In the state plan, there are instructions and definitions embedded via link within each module. And those are instructions and definitional text that was taken from the state plan itself. It doesn't show up as static directions or text in most cases. There's a few places where there is fixed instructions. Most of it is linked, and it's there literally for your reference. So if you need a refresher about what do you mean doing centralized versus regional, or what do you mean by revolving loan versus partnership loans, or what do you mean by those, all of those definitions and those kinds of things are linked so that you can get to them without going and finding the state plan document and finding the right page, et cetera. So hopefully people find that helpful. The narrative, the state plan, unlike the APR, is a lot of narrative text. I mean, in the modules that are about activities, the bulk of what you are entering is descriptive narrative text. You're just describing how you're doing device loan, or how you're doing, you know, training, how you're doing. So a lot of narrative text. It is very, very wise for you to compose narrative data, especially your activity descriptions, you know, things that tend to be more long-winded than a couple, 3 sentences, in a Word document. Save it, do a cut paste, because the odds are that when you do this year 3-year state plan, and then you go to do one 3 years from now, you can use a lot of that same text. All you're going to need to do is update. I mean, let's face it, you probably are not in 3 years going to completely overhaul your you know, device loan program so that nothing you said about it 3 years ago is still appropriate. It is just really smart to do this, save that text. It will save you a lot of time probably down the road. And it's just obviously easier to, you know, compose and cut and paste in something that has lovely word processing features that, you know, a text box and a data entry form doesn't tend to have. So
Diane,
yeah.
this is Janice Carson. With that said, are you going to provide us a Word document of the state plan like we have the APR?
Sure. In fact, it's the same one as last go round. Nothing
Nothing has changed on it at all?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
none of the required fields or anything have changed. Yeah, so it's the same text. What I could do, if it's helpful, I mean, I could put together a Word document that's more of an outline.
That would be great without all of the details.
Yep.
That would, yeah.
Yeah, if I mean, I can go through the state plan and just pull out like enter description of your device loan program here, you know, and then, you know, so it's just a high level outline. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly do that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Cool.
That would be really helpful.
No problem. Okay, Vance, next slide. So hopefully this works. I always hate going to something live because you just know something's going to go haywire, but we'll give this a shot. Hopefully it works. So what we're going to do through the walkthrough, I want to show you modules A through D. Those are the ones you'll have to do annually, and they sort of generate the next, you know, modules. So I'm going to walk through those. And then I'll walk through reuse and other state financing just to show some nuances there. And then Vance is going to walk through the mark, complete, and submit process and how the document reports are working with HTML, PDF documents. And before we even do this, I'm going to say this. Thank you, Sarah Sack. Sarah was one of the beta testers, and I'm using her state plan, which, you know, is, yeah, where she intentionally tried to break things. And so but it's that data that I'm using, and I'm going to do some edits in what she put in to force it to show you error messages, that sort of thing. So, all right, Vance, let's see if this will pull up for us. Okay.
Go back. Still there, Diane?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, this is module A. And so actually, Vance, go back to general info, yeah, and open that so I can show. Okay, so if you scroll down where it asks if you have an implementing entity, and Sarah, I know you don't, but I checked it yes for you. If you check this box that says you have an implementing entity, then you need to fill in the information about who that is. But now if you go to the module A, Vance, that check mark on general information populates this yes on the screen you see here where it says, does your agency have an implementing entity? That's not something you select on this screen. It's going to be populated based on what you said in general info. And part of the reason for that is that I think everybody's accurate in their general info about who has an implementing entity and who doesn't. So that just kind of eliminates one potential place where people can make an error. If that is defaulted to yes, because you checked the box in general information saying you have one and you provided their contact info, then you do have to describe the mechanisms that ensure coordination of activities between the implementing entity and the lead agency, the state. That's a requirement of statute. So if it's pre-populated, yes, you will need to enter this narrative data. If you do not have an implementing entity, you don't check that box in general info, that is going to pre-populate no, and no box is going to show up. You're done, kind of. You do have to look at the other two questions, which is, has there been a change in lead agency or has there been a change in implementing entity since the last state plan? Those are defaulted to no, because odds are there has not been a change, and you're done. Because this is defaulted to yes, you should have to put something in that text box, I think, Vance.
Yep.
Like XXX.
Something. Yep.
And then, and then if that's saved, then this module is valid. Okay, module B is the advisory council. And this is the one, can you do modify? Yeah. So this is the one where I told you that you can, the numbers are 0 to, I think it's a double-digit number. And you'll notice I've got 2 VRs, no blind, separate blind, which is fine. There's 1 Center for Independent Living, and then State Workforce Development, there's a 0. Because there's a 0 in that cell, there's a required explanation. If that is changed to a 1, that required explanation goes away. So this is all dependent on, if you put a 0, then you're going to have to provide an explanation. If you don't, then there will be no explanation box. Now, Vance, if you want to change the, consumer number down to 11. So, okay, when that number was 12, there was a consumer majority. Now that it's 11, there is no longer a consumer majority. So the explanation box comes up. And enter text. And below that, it will say, this number 8 is basically just an affirmation of either you do or you don't have a consumer majority. It's not something you enter data in. It is literally keyed off of, if your percentage is over 50%, then you have a consumer majority, and it's going to say yes. If you don't, it's going to say no. Now, doesn't mean, you know, you have to run screaming from the room because you're in, you know, your grant is going to, you know, spontaneously combust or anything. That's not it. It's just saying, we don't meet this right now, and here's why, and we're, you know, we're working on it. Trust us, we're doing our best. And many of you have instances where you can't get appointments through, depending on how the appointments process works, etc. So yeah. If you want advanced, yeah, just leave that blank and hit save. Yeah. Because this module is not valid, there was an explanation, it didn't have a consumer majority, and he didn't fill out the explanation. There's an error message saying you have to enter the explanation in 7.1 down there. And the point I want to make to folks is there is an error in this module, so it has not saved. The state plan is set up so that you have to fix errors within the module for it to save. So it's not like the APR where you can save with errors. Rationale here is this is not like you've got numbers that you've got to go do some research about why your numbers are off. These errors are just you forgot to fill out something, and these modules are short. They're like this. So they're going to save once it's valid. Now, again, if you want to tweak your description of why, you can always go back and do that. And you can always put, XXX in the narrative box to get it to validate and save. But I'm just telling you, don't be surprised by the fact that you need to clear the error messages to get the individual module to save. So yeah, if you put, change it back to 12, it'll work too. So now there is 52%, so it's saved. Okay, you want to go to module C and the financial numbers. Okay, so if there is fixed text in this one, not the linked explanations, in addition to linked explanations, because you can see down here where it says all of the instructions, you can always pull that up, and that's all straight out of the state plan. But up top, it does clarify in fixed text that this table is about the FY19 award. And line D, where it says total award, 430, 572, that's FY19 Kansas award. And each grantees will be populated in that line. So all you're entering is line A and B. C is populating itself. D is already there. E populates if you have a lapse amount, and then you enter the training transition. These numbers are accurate. They all line up. There's the totals. Good. Everything's good. Vance, if you want to change, like the 300 to 400, and and up go back up to the first table.
Okay. Oh, this
And-
one.
Yeah, and change that 140 to change it to 130.
I think I changed this one on accident.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what this is doing now is populating. So it's saying there's, well, never mind. Go back and change the state level to like 150. Go the other direction.
Oh, state level. Or which one?
No, that one. 400, 450. Okay, well. Well, this isn't calculating like it should. It's not, so the total is coming 530, which is correct. The total award's 430, and the difference is not a lapsed amount, it's an overage. So it should come up. I'm not sure how, hit save and see what it's, do you see what I'm saying? Okay, so it's just showing it as a negative. I don't know if that's confusing to people or not, could be for me. Yep, we might need to do something with that. But my point is, so by changing the 300 to 400, that changed the total expenditures to 530 when the total grant is only 430. So, you know, no, you didn't spend 100,000 more than you had in the grant award. So it's coming up. And while it's in the lapsed amount thing, I don't know, and I guess that's why it's showing a negative number. We may need to try to figure out a better way of showing that. I don't know how, but anyway, so it's saying the total expenditures cannot exceed the grant award. So instead of it, if you put in an overage, it's going to give you that error message. If you put in an underage, like change the 400,000 to 200,000. That will recalculate. So the total's 330, and it just gives you a greater lapse amount, which if you actually lapsed that amount of money is fine, and it will save. The other way, if you try to report an overage, you expended more than you actually had, it won't save. And apparently it's showing the in that lapsed amount line, it's showing up as a negative number. Like I said, I don't know if that's a very helpful way of expressing that it's an overage or not, but that's what it will do. In other words, it will not let you report spending more than that actual grant award is. It will let you report less because people do lapse money. Sometimes it's a little tiny bit amount and, you know, irrelevant, and sometimes it's a somewhat bigger amount. The other thing I want to point out in this table, these are actual expenditures. The percentages automatically calculate, and it will show you on state level if the percentage right now it's showing 46, well, that doesn't meet 60%, or if you happen to be a 70% required because you use flexibility, it doesn't meet that either. There is you know, there's no validation rule that says you have to meet those. Those are in the law and you should meet them, but you expend what you expend. And, you know, so you report the numbers you actually expended, even if they don't meet the 60 or 70%, you report the actual expenditures, you know, accurately. And this is just, it's kind of like a warning telling you, oops, you didn't meet the 60 or 70%. And the same thing is true with the training, transition training technical assistance. That amount, the calculation should be 5%. If you don't meet it, it's just like a note to you saying, oops, you didn't meet this. You probably need to think about this for future expenditures. If you want to go down to the next table, yeah, and if you just want to change, yeah, you can change any of the numbers just to show if you want to change, yeah, the 140 to 130, and then it'll. And hit save. And now it's saying that table 2 has to equal the total award. The total award was 443,831. And when Vance changed that first number by 10,000, now he's short in the total. So, and if you look right above where the table starts, it actually, you know, is the FY20 award amount will be there. So that's the number that your total needs to equal. If it doesn't, then the module isn't going to save for you. Yeah, and it should save now. Okay. I'm going to go back and let me show D and show how that. Okay. This is Module D that is the core selections that populate the other modules for individual activities. So in this case, Kansas has checked off financial loan, other state financing that directly provides AT, other state financing that creates savings, device reassignment or open-ended loan, has not checked off exchange, has checked off short-term device loans and demonstrations. So if you go back to list, you will notice that all those modules, financial loan, the two other state financing, there is no module H because exchange was not checked. There is a module I, J, and all of the K, and then all the state leadership activities are there for everybody. So if you don't do other state financing at all, then you are not going to have module F or G. So it is really important to make sure D is accurate, done first, and then you get the rest of the modules that you'll need to complete. Hopefully that makes perfect sense to everybody. Okay, if you want to open refurbish. Again, just as a reminder, so these are the questions that come up for the state level activities. Who conducts the activity, and there's embedded additional definitions. So if you need to remember what it means by the state AT program doing it versus other entities, you can pull that up at any point in time. So who conducts the activity? Where is the activity conducted centrally, regional sites, etc.? Do you charge a fee for this activity? And then the list of partnerships, kinds of things. And this is a check as many as you need to, etc. And you can always check and uncheck. So if you check it by mistake, you just check it again and it unchecks, kind of thing. That's the way it works. And if you go down, if you just want to delete, just to show you again. And if you hit save now, since there's no descriptive text in there, it'll tell you, you have to describe the activity. So that gives you an idea of how most of the activity modules work. They all look very similar. You're going to pull them up. It's going to have these same questions for each activity that you conduct, say you do. And again, the most challenging part is the narrative text. So once you get that done kind of outside, and do it as a cut and paste, hopefully this is, a module shouldn't take you very long to complete once you get in and open it up. Okay, now I am going to walk through one of the other state financing just for you people who do this. Now remember, so this is collective. So let's say you do telecom, EDP, regular telephone stuff, and you do deafblind EDP, and you have a last resort fund. When you answer the rest of these questions, it is for all of those activities together. So you may do it all centrally, or you may do it all regionally, or it may be a combination because one's done centrally and one's done regionally. So again, just reminding you, and this one has the option of, do you charge a fee for this activity? Yes and no, because you might charge a fee for one and not for another. So this one is a little different. The two other state financing are just a little different. Same thing with the partnerships. This is partnerships for all of the activities. So it may be kind of a big bunch, or it might not, just depends on, those activities and how you implement them. So I think, go down to the text. It's one text box. So if you do multiple activities, my suggestion is to, and what I put in here as an example is just, so the regular telecom and deafblind equipment distributions, you know, that's the title and here's the description. We do all of these and this is how we do them because they're kind of linked together and they're kind of similar, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they aren't. Maybe you report them kind of separately under separate, you know, header kind of title things. And then last resort fund. We also have this last resort fund and this is how it works. I would just, you know, almost section them off as paragraphs in this narrative so that there's, you know, anybody pulling this out could easily say, oh, there's the description for the program I was looking for, the regular telecom program. So I know it's not the best structure, but trust me, trying to think about separating individual other state financing activities within a same category out, you know, gave Vance and I both, yeah, a night sweat. So hopefully this works. And those of you, again, there's not a lot of you that do multiples under each of these, but if you do have any issues or questions, just get a hold of me and we'll make sure we get it worked out for you. And I think that is all I was going to walk through. And I think you can take it from here, Vance, and do, yep, the submission process.
Sure. So yeah, once you have all your data in and you're ready to submit this for approval, just like in the APR, you'll have the certification and submit button down here. When you click on that, it will do a validate and make sure that everything has been entered. If everything hasn't been entered, it'll pop up a little error saying you still need to complete module M or whatever module that you didn't complete, just to make sure that's in there. And then you'll go ahead and read through the assurances. And if you agree with all of this, then you hit the I agree button. And once that is done, you do get an email notification of that. And it'll tell you who it's sent to, and it locks all of the data and marks it as complete, so that later in it can be ACL approved. Then you have the report on this. So there's one report that prints out. So it's not a report for every module. It's a one overall state plan report. So I'll go ahead and click the full report. Just like with the APR, it pulls it up in this window so you can view the information. You can download an HTML version of it, just like you can with the APR. You can print this out, so you have it. And in this one, we do have a PDF button so that we'll convert this report into a PDF document, and that you can go ahead and say download and save to and disseminate however you need to. So that is new with the state plan. It does have that option to convert that into an accessible PDF that you can then disseminate as you need to. As far as access for this, if you have access to the APR, you should have access to this as well. Lori is asking a question. The print HTML, it can be completed prior to clicking the assurances, so you can do that, you know, before you mark it off if you need to. So that's available at any time. It'll just print what's there. But as far as access goes, so if you do not have access, or the person for your agency does not have that access that they need, everybody has a new role that is state plan admin. So you would just go to the user that you need to give access to this, go down to their roles, and make sure that state plan admin is checked, and then they will have the ability to get in and modify the state plan as needed. But as it is right now, I believe everybody that has access to the APR should have access to this as well. If you don't, then you'll just need to go in and make sure that you have that role assigned to you. And that is all I had. Let's start our slideshow back over. Is there any other questions?
There are a few questions in the chat.
Yeah, this is Diane, and I responded to one of them. The question about the required, the agency representatives, required agency representatives, either 4 or 5, if you have a separate blind agency. Even if those people are people with disabilities who use AT, quote unquote consumers, they cannot double count also as a consumer rep. That's actually a statute statement someplace that they can't double count. They're either a required agency representative or a consumer representative, not both. So yeah, it's a unduplicated count of members on your council in that that module. The question, Vance, if you want to, the PDF accessibility question.
Yeah, we are using iText to convert the HTML to PDF, which retains all the accessibility from the HTML into the PDF and creates an accessible PDF.
And I think you answered the question about being able to print prior to submission.
Yep.
And Rob, you want to take Rick's question? Is Rob still on?
He's still on.
Yeah, I'm on. Sorry. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just curious if this is the required place or if there's another one. I've been asked that question, so
yeah, I saw. Thank you, Rick, for that question. I saw that question in the chat, and so yes, this is what is currently available for us for this online submission. So the AT APR, as well as the state plan for AT, we also encourage the day-to-day for the AT APR to be submitted into this NATAD system. And then it does get directly submitted to ACL. I'm looking at the follow-up from Tammy Coger in terms of what Katata does. Vance packs up the content and ships it over to ACL.
But Rob, is it required or is it something that is preferred?
This is a requirement.
Okay.
So ACL has, yeah, it's a requirement.
A requirement to put it in NATADS.
That's right.
okay.
Yeah,
I know it's a
ACL.
requirement to report, but I just was curious if the requirement to put it into into NATADS. So
This is required.
okay.
The ACL has contracted with UMass Boston ICI to get it done in this manner. And so we've worked with ACL's data entity on this, and this is a requirement. So this is something, so it can be uniformly required under Section 4, so we can have this content provided to Congress for the report to Congress, so it can be aggregated. So this is required. Same with the AT APR.
And you are saying that ACL is encouraging the ATAC programs to use the day-to-day in NATADS?
Now, who wouldn't encourage that? That's an excellent tool to help folks with the aggregate numbers in that system. There's other systems available, but it certainly, yeah.
But are we required to use NATADS?
For the day-to-day system, no.
Okay.
Thank you, Rob.
Oh, you're welcome, Rick.
Hey, Rob, this is Tammy. I'm sorry, one more question. So just so I'm clear, I'm sorry. I'm always a day late and a dollar short. Okay, so ACL does not require us to use NATADS for day-to-day. We can use our own system or another system, but we are required to use NATADS for APR and now for the new state plan.
That's correct.
Okay, and who is that contract with? who manages NATADS? Or who's that with now?
Who manages NATADS?
Well, you said there was a contract with someone to do
Oh, I'm sorry.
NATADS?
In order to
Yeah.
develop, in order to develop the state plan for AT, as it was previously going to be housed within ACL reporting, a decision was made at ACL in order to provide that under Section 6 AT national activities, and the cooperative agreement is with UMass Boston ICI for this.
I see. Okay. Thank you. I was just wondering.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Any
Right.
other?
Yeah, Diane. This is Tammy again. Hey, when does this open up?
It's actually open now. It's actually it's on the dashboard. If you go into into NATADS, the state plan is on the dashboard with the APR.
Okay, and so we can actually get in there and start using it if we wanted to, or we're ready for that.
Correct.
All right, thanks.
Correct. Yep. The last slide is just kind of a repeat of the fact that this is a 3-year state plan. The plan for the off-year updates are modules A, B, C, and D, and then there'll just be an open-ended, if something did change in terms of you started a new activity, stopped, and I mean by doing that, the broad activity, like you stop doing exchange and are just doing refurbishing, whatever, then that would be a change in D, and there will be an open-ended description of what that change is. So again, the off years should be not take much time at all, quite frankly, especially if there's not, significant changes going on in terms of program activities. And I think that's all the slides. And our contact information and webinar, as usual, will be archived, and it'll be, I'll send a message out. Takes a while to get the captions synced up and it ready to go, but as soon as it's, I'll send a message out with the link where it's posted, so it is online and archived.
And Diane, this has to be completed by September 30th, right? 2022.
Rob, I'll let you take that one again.
This is Helen, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Helen, the state plan for AT, the due date for the state plan is July 1st.
Oh, July 1st.
That's right. So some of the information that I was describing earlier had to do with the obligation deadline for the FY 2020 awards.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If there's no last minute questions, hopefully everybody's comfortable, and since you've used the general NATAD system before, the navigation will be familiar. Hopefully it's not a difficult process. Most things are going to look familiar when you get into it. But if you have any questions, reach out to me or Rob or Vance, and we will do everything we can to help you. Thanks, everybody.